There are many cinematic scenes that will make viewers squirm in their seats or look away. There are two brutal scenes that I thought of recently that have similarities. The similarities are not just in the backstory, but in the act of brutality itself. Let's discuss these scenes from American History X and the Sopranos episode called The Second Coming. As usual, this analysis is for fans of these works. It should go without saying that this contains spoilers. In American History X, some gang members come to violate Derek's family home. They are sore losers who reneged on a bet. They made a bet with Derek's skinhead gang that whichever team lost would be required to stay away from the basketball courts. Derek's team won, and the gang members walked off. That should have been the end, but they returned to Derek's place late at night. They are armed. They smash the window of Derek's truck and try to steal it. It's unclear if they plan to break into the house. Derek's younger brother Danny hears the vandalism and alerts Derek. Derek grabs his pistol, puts his boots on, and heads to the front door. He eyes an armed man on the front step through the peephole. Then he flings the door open and fires bullets at him, killing him. He keeps firing at the other gang members until he empties the clip. There's a wounded man on the ground. He's no longer a threat to Derek and his family. But Derek does something extreme. He drags the man to the curb and tells him to put his mouth on it. We see the man's teeth on the concrete and can hear them clattering against it. We see Derek raise his booted foot above the man's head and quickly stomp his foot down, making a sickening sound. Derek murdered the man, and there was no self-defense here. In The Second Coming, Tony's daughter is verbally violated and intimidated. Meadow is out at a restaurant with her boyfriend. Coco Coagliano is there. Earlier, Coco found out that Meadow's father, Tony Soprano, took him and Butchie off the payroll at a construction site. This was over an asbestos disagreement with the New Jersey and the New York crime families. Coco and Butchie beat the foreman when he begrudgingly tells them the bad news. Later, Coco is a bit drunk on Sambuca and decides to take out some frustration on Meadow. He goes over and tells her that she has whipped cream on her mouth, and that he'd be happy to add to it. Before he walks away, he says it must be fun tucking her in at night. When Meadow reluctantly tells her father about this, Tony acts like it's no big deal. He tells her that he'll talk to Coco, and says that he's an idiot, but he's harmless. But it's obvious to the viewer that Tony is extremely upset. He sits at the table in silence and stares into space. He's raging inside. He wastes no time tracking Coco down. Tony pistol whips and punches him repeatedly. He threatens to shoot Butchie if he interferes. Coco has already been punished well beyond what he deserves. Nevertheless, Tony drags Coco and puts his face on a platform. Despite Butchie's pleas of "don't do it," Tony stomps on the back of Coco's head. We see his teeth flying across the floor. At AJ's family therapy session, Tony discovers one of Coco's teeth in the fold of his pants. Both of these scenes don't use any fancy special effects to show what this does to a human being. Just thinking about the possibilities is enough to shock the viewer. Think of the cinematography for both scenes. In American History X, there is a very long shot of Derek and the man on the curb. In The Sopranos, the camera shows a shot of the floor, with neither Coco nor Tony in the frame. The viewer doesn't have to look away. You feel like you just watched something out of a horror movie without actually seeing it. We find out through later dialogue that Tony didn't kill Coco, unlike Derek, who killed the gang member. Even so, let's discuss more similarities between this episode and American History X. Other similarities include palpable anger in dialogue. Derek says, "My father gave me that truck, you motherfucker." And Tony says, "My f***ing daughter, my daughter." When Derek is about to curb stomp the man, Danny yells, "Derek, no." And right before Tony curb stomps Coco, Butchie says, "Don't do it." The sanctity of Derek's home was violated. A home is where one should feel safe with their family. Derek is in there having a good time with his girlfriend, and the rest of the family are in bed. but a bunch of armed criminals trespass on his property and smash the window of his truck, attempt to steal it, and who knows what else. This isn't just any truck. It was Derek's father's truck, so it hurts and angers him to see people wrecking something that is of sentimental value. Similarly, Tony's home was violated. We associate the home with family. Coco violated Meadow. To hear about some man harassing your daughter with sexual overtones is enough to drive any father into a rage. Note that after Meadow tells Tony about Coco's whipped cream comment, she hesitates to tell him what he said after that. But Tony has a good idea of what he said. He sees how hard it is for Meadow to tell this story, and that probably angers him further. He saves his daughter the embarrassment and just says it's alright. These violations result in both protagonists hurting their adversaries with something called a curb stomp. It's when the victim's mouth is opened and placed over the edge of a platform and the back of their head is stomped on with such force that it can knock their teeth out or break their jaw. This can sometimes result in death, which was the case of Derek's victim. It's a brutal act, and just speaking about it makes me shudder. American History X came out in 1998, and the Sopranos episode aired in 2007. Were the Sopranos writers inspired by American History X? They very well could have been, since this act isn't something that's depicted much in cinema. Little Carmine brokers a meeting with Tony and Phil, the two bosses of the feuding mafia families. When they show up, Phil changes his mind. He rejects Tony's peace offering of drills, and later makes plans to take out the New Jersey family. Similarly, in American History X, the curb stomp leads to the gangs feuding even further. Derek is in prison and is unable to prevent his brother Danny from following in his footsteps. Derek isn't around, so Danny becomes a zealous member of the DOC. He shows his toughness to gang members at school. This leads to a tragic ending when a gang member shoots him to death in the high school bathroom. That shooting always surprised me, because now that kid is more than likely going to prison for a very long time and may never get out. He shot him in a very public building, so it's safe to argue he's gonna get caught. The look on the kid's face after he shoots Danny reads regret. These two curb stomp scenes have a strong impact on the viewer without showing the result in graphic detail, like the violence in a film from the Saw series. They can serve as an important reminder to not let our emotions override our rational minds. Derek and Tony may have felt good in the moment, but they both suffered horrible consequences later. If you are enjoying this content, please consider subscribing, because that motivates me to keep making more content like this.